Hello again, everyone, and welcome to the Eat the Chalk podcast, brought to you by the DFS headquarters, your one-stop shop for all your DFS needs, wants, desires, everything that you could possibly think of. We've got just coming off a great U.S. Open, still got NASCAR going on. The golf season is mixing back and forth between one year and the other, but we've got that covered for you. Major League Baseball, we're getting towards the playoffs, the NBA playoffs, the NHL Stanley Cup Finals. We are doing it all. Tennis. LOL. I learned what that meant from last week. Some League of Legends stuff. But please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit whatever button you want to do. Leave a comment, 5-star review for this podcast, because that's what helps keeps us going. It's what allows us to do this podcast every week. The Eat the Chalk podcast. You can find us on any platform, including YouTube, and you can watch the replay on YouTube as well. And of course, we can't forget our expert in freshness and also in the NFL. At Nick from CWE is with us. Nick, I'm Bryan from at HQ Golf Guy, leading the way. Nick is the one that brings you all the smart. Nick, we are here to talk some NFL Week 3. Are you kind of surprised, first of all, that we made it to Week 3 of the NFL season? Did you think we would get to this point?
Not at all, but there's one thing I got to ask you, Bryan.
Mm-hmm.
Is Nick from CWE looking good today or what?
It's 2 weeks in a row.
It's going to be every week. It's my shtick, all right? No, it was I've never doubted this NFL season. I've definitely been, from the second COVID hit and everything started canceling, there was no way a bunch of rich white men were going to let this affect their bottom line. Like it was always going to happen. Man, to be honest, like I had a really good. Are we getting that click clack again?
Yeah, it's okay though. It's not as worrisome.
All right, good. I had a really good week. Period. Took down a truck race GPP on whatever day that was on. I don't remember. College football was okay. Didn't lose money. And then, man, like the NFL, I had low hopes. Let's just put it that way, because I had like 12 points combined between Derrick Henry, Julio Jones, and Chris Herndon in cash. And I mean, I just assumed I was done. And I cashed quite easily. I mean, it was, I had that bolstered with Zeke, Jonathan Taylor, Deontay Johnson, CeeDee Lamb. So that all worked out. Came close to some really big hits, but just missed. I had a lineup in the $15 3-entry max that finished at like 210 points with Saquon Barkley in it. And I get what I deserve, because Saquon Barkley was my fade of the week. If you watch the coach's handbook,
mm-hmm.
or if you look at the coach's handbook, but I was building the lineup and I was like, man, I have this salary. I've overdosed with Zeke and Derrick Henry and everything. Let me just like pivot a little bit and let me have one Barkley lineup. And that's what happened.
He's in my season long when I told myself at the draft, take Zeke. I had that little note in my pocket, like the movie Draft Day, and chickened out at the last minute and went Barkley. And the rest is history there. In the old season long too. So, but you can't talk about Week 3 without talking about Week 2, and obviously the big news, which are the injuries, which just are piled up. It's ridiculous to go through and see some of those injuries. Obviously, the biggest ones for fantasy are Saquon Barkley is done for the year. Christian McCaffrey could be done for a month and a half. We're talking about here. Paris Campbell is another guy that's out. There's just a load of them that are Devontae Freeman has actually signed with the Giants. What are your takeaways from the injuries this week and how it can affect Week 3 and how we should be looking at value in Week 3?
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll break down each game individually, but I think this is really like one of those spots where you just look at like the whole, and people always gravitate towards like who's replacing this guy. And they really fail to like look at the whole context of a team and maybe say that like instead of taking the running back who's replacing the running back that got hurt, is it possible that there's just more emphasis on the receiving options? Like, especially when you're talking about CMC and Saquon Barkley, it's like a massive drop-off to what their backups are. So we'll talk about it, but it's one of those things where I'm sitting there and where other people are getting, rock hard over guys that otherwise don't have a role on their team. Now all of a sudden they're the best thing since sliced bread.
Well, let's do it. Let's get right into it. Week 3, we're going to kick it off with a great matchup between the Las Vegas Raiders, and get used to saying that, and the New England Patriots without Tom Brady. Get used to saying that. Both teams, have looked really good. I mean, I understand the Patriots lost to the Seahawks, but could have won it there at the end, and have really looked really good with Cam Newton under center. So let's get to it. Newton's at 6,700, Derek Carr at 54. The running back situation, Josh Jacobs at 73. Not really sure you need to worry about anybody else on Vegas. Sony Michel is at 44. James White should be back at 53. Burkhead at 4. I don't know. The wide receivers for Vegas, you've got Ruggs at 5,000. He didn't do much last week. Brian Edwards at 3,700. Renfrow at 43. You've got Julian Edelman leading the way for the Patriots at 6,200. N'Keal Harry at 42. Birds at 3,000. Waller is the big aspect of what you want in Vegas at 57. Ryan Izzo on the other side at 3,000. Devin Asiasi, the former Michigan commit, played there for a year and transferred out, is at 3,000 as well. This could be an interesting fantasy game, maybe for some guys that you don't necessarily think of.
As a whole, I mean, like, color me uninterested.
Okay.
I think that, like, Cam is going to be a guy that's in play every week. Can you try muting yourself while I'm talking to see if it helps at all? Let's see if it's me or it's you. Yeah, I think, okay, so I think we have this solved. I think when one of us is talking, the other one just has to mute the other one. That's perfect. That helps so much. That way we know that the audio quality of this is going to be stupendous. Because, look, not everybody can see me. And it's unfortunate. I get it. But, like, hearing me is good enough. And we don't want crackles and snacks and pops in the background, whatever the Rice Krispie motto is. Anyway,
the problem is I can still hear the crackles even when I'm muted.
That's crazy. So it might be on your end anyway. Whatever. I don't hear anything. We'll leave it to the users and see how it goes. Patriots backfield, even if James White isn't there, man, like, that sucks. Terrible situation to lose your family. And honestly, I haven't even really heard what went on with his mother, if she ended up making it through the car accident or what. But, I lost my mother young, and it's way younger than James White. And I've always battled, like, is it better or worse? Because your relationships grow as you go along. So, like, I could understand, like, the older a parent gets, when they're taken suddenly, it hurts because you have a more mature relationship, whereas it's much different when you're younger. Don't get me wrong, it's still fucked me up pretty good. But I think he's the only back you can really look at on New England. And if you want to build a narrative, this is a game, if he comes back, that I'll take shares of, just because I think that there is some truth into people playing for situations like that. You look back at, in baseball, after Tyler Skaggs died, the team pitched a combined no-hitter, and that pitching staff wasn't exactly good, I believe. I could be way wrong, but I think that happened. If not, I'm living in an alternative universe, apparently. I think that Julian Edelman's an interesting one. I think people will chase the big performance, and I think you'll see spikes of situations like that. But, like, give me shots of N'Keal Harry at 4,500. Give me shots of Damiere Byrd, even cheaper than that, because Cam's going to look to them. And Harry saw a lot of targets. Byrd had a good game. I think he had 9 targets in that game. I think if I'm playing in tournaments, I'm not stacking Cam with anybody. If I play Cam, there's a lot of good quarterbacks this week. Especially, like, Showdown gives you a really good mentality to try to understand how you want to build lineups, right? And so for every game, you have to kind of look at it as a whole and figure out, like, how do I see this game going? You almost have to, like, play all of your lineups aggregate based off of how you see each individual game going, because otherwise you don't win tournaments by just throwing random guys in the lineup, right? Like, there have to be reasons. So for me, I think this is a game, and I said this about the Saints game. I thought it was going to be a game that, the Raiders were going to have to pass a lot in because they would be trailing. It didn't happen, but they still passed a lot. So even though I was wrong about the result, I was right about the outcome. Here, I kind of see the same thing. I don't feel like, I'm not a buyer of this Raiders team yet. I think that Drew Brees on the road, and especially at his age, we even saw him at home the week before. He didn't look good. I don't think Cam Newton is in that same position. We just saw Cam Newton, like prime Cam Newton, run through the Seahawks. So I think that, I'm saying that because I think it becomes another negative game script situation for Josh Jacobs. I'm really playing Josh Jacobs in situations where I think that the Raiders are going to be ahead. I think he will be more involved in the passing game, but he's not a Zeke. He's not a Barkley. He's not a CMC. He is absolutely coming off the field in a lot of third down situations where they're going to have to pass. So there's a little bit of a less of appeal. Like, look, every running back is going to come off the field. Tony Pollard gets some series. Alexander Madison gets some series. Jeremy McNichols gets some series behind Derrick Henry. But, like, for the most part, they are super, super heavily involved. I just don't feel that way about Jacobs. And there were a multitude of times where, either Richard or Booker were out there. So, and then, the passing game for the Raiders look like Henry Ruggs appears to look like he is potentially the best decoy in the NFL. That doesn't get you fantasy points. But you're ultimately going to run into situations where he actually does do well. And then Darren Waller's a beast, and he's an every week consideration.
Is Waller good enough to be that wide receiver one that they need? Because it looks to me, when I go through and see Ruggs, Edwards, Renfro, and even Aguilar, they're just missing that guy. And I don't want to say Amari Cooper was that guy, but that kind of Amari Cooper type guy.
Yeah, and I mean, you got two rookies in Ruggs and Edwards that I think over time, both of them are going to develop. I think in the short term, though, man, like, you talk about unconsolidated production from the receiver position, and Oakland's one of those teams. I mean, they had Aguilar out there. They had Zay Jones out there. There's a lot of mouths that could possibly get fed. So that's where I'm really, like, I would rather take a shot on a guy like Henry Ruggs, who we know has the burner speed. And if Carr can just hit him, all it's going to take, especially as he continues to do the Mike Williams gets a lot of air yards but never comes through, all it takes is for, when his price is at like 4,500, is just going to take a 60-yard touchdown bomb, and it's going to be all worthwhile. So as a whole, like for cash games especially, I'm not interested here, but there's some spots you could look in tournaments.
One team in particular that has been a fantasy dream so far this year, except for Julio Jones last week, but Matt Ryan's been fantastic for the Atlanta Falcons. They are at home, 1:00 game against the Chicago Bears. Matt Ryan comes in at 66. Trubisky's at 57. David Montgomery on Chicago's side is at 57. Tariq Cohen at 4,300. Todd Gurley at 58. Montgomery was one of those guys that got hurt but did come back into the game last week. On the receiver side, you've got Allen Robinson at 62. Anthony Miller at 49. Cordero Patterson's at 36. On the other side, you've got Julio and Calvin Ridley both over 7,000, as Julio 74 and Ridley 72. And Russell Gage, who you mentioned last week is wanting to see something from, is at 51. Hayden Hurst, the Falcons tight end, is at 47, and Jimmy Graham is at 34. Russell Gage, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think that, like as a whole, it's going to be incredibly frustrating trying to peg the Falcons on a week-to-week basis. Like, Calvin Ridley is emerging, but he was emerging last year. This is not a new story. Like this Calvin Ridley 100-yard, 2-touchdown games, this is not new to 2020. We saw this in 2019. And then there's just games where Austin Hooper was 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. And there were games where Julio was 160 yards and 3 touchdowns. And, it just makes it very hard, especially in cash games, to want, even though that I'm a donkey that played Julio last week, but oddly enough, Julio was the last piece in my lineup. That's the worst part about it. And it had to be a receiver because I knew that I was playing 3 running backs. So it was just like, well, it's Julio. I think I was just unable to get to Hopkins. I was already playing like a 2K defense, so there's nowhere further down to go. I don't know. I'd consider Hurst possibly. Let me put it this way. Matt Ryan seems to make sense like as a cash game quarterback, but he doesn't have I don't think he doesn't have that floor, that ceiling like Kyler, Dak, Russell Wilson, Josh Allen, because he doesn't do anything with his legs. So, you're really he needs to do 450 and 4 or 5 touchdowns to give you a 35-point game, where Dak and some of these other guys, if they rush for 40 yards and score a touchdown, they've given you 10 points for basically doing very little. I think he's okay for cash. I'm not playing any of the options in the receiving game in cash. I think every last one of them, all 3 receivers, Hayden Hurst, all great options in tournaments. This is the great tournament setup because every week you could play Matt Ryan with 2 of his receivers and a bring back, and it's going to be viable in tournaments. There's just no question about it. I mean, it's super easy. So this week, hey, go back to the well, grab Julio. People hate Julio right now, so you're going to get him at much lower ownership than you should get. Pair him with Hayden Hurst, and bring it back with, I wish there was someone on the Bears you could actually fucking bring it back with, but you can't.
Is the problem though that you're kind of guessing on who to stack with Ryan each week?
Yeah, but that's not really relevant for tournaments, right? Because all you're trying to do is capture the potential of what could happen. So if on a given week, if Atlanta has a ceiling game like they've kind of had the last 2 weeks, that you've seen, the first week, all 3 receivers over 100 yards. So any 2 of them with Matt Ryan would have been fine. Last week, you could have had Ridley, Gage, or Hayden Hurst as the 2, and then could have brought it back with Gallup, Dalton Schultz, or CeeDee Lamb, or even Zeke, and it would have been a viable 1-2-1 stack. So I'm not looking at these guys. None of them are priced in an area where it's really making me go like, wow, yeah, I need to jam that in my cash game lineup, but all super viable in tournaments. You're muted.
That's going to be the issue.
It is going to be the issue, but it's all right.
Is this a situation where obviously the Bears on offense are a train wreck, but even defensively they're not what we're used to seeing out of the Bears? So teams that play the Bears are more viable this year than they maybe have been in the past?
Yeah, it's my general take. Kind of interested here to see how the public treats Trubisky. I could see, especially after Russell Wilson and Dak having 35 fantasy point games against the Falcons, it's really desirable to want to take a guy who's priced as cheaply as Trubisky, but I just have no faith that he's going to be able to put it together. And usually it is a $5,700 quarterback going against a terrible defense. They're likely going to be playing from behind. I don't, call me crazy. I'm just not on the Biscuits team this week. And, Atlanta's held up reasonably well against running backs. They don't get credit for their ability to actually defend the run because they've been so porous for years against, receiving backs, and people can't differentiate the fact that you can be good against the run. They crushed Chris Carson in the running game, but got crushed by Chris Carson in the receiving game. So that just kind of shows you. And then all of the receivers are huge liabilities. I'm not playing Cole Kmet. I'm not playing Jimmy Graham at tight end. So you're basically hoping that Allen Robinson can have even a floor game at this point. Anthony Miller got benched last week. There's one guy who's stone minimum price that's actually shown a little bit, and it's Darnell Mooney. Did not think he was going to be a thing. Don't necessarily think he's going to be a thing. He's a 3K crapper that I would be okay, like, taking some tournament shots with just like 2 or 3% if you're doing over 100 lineups, because there's always that outside chance that he goes for like 3 for 55 and 2 touchdowns. And, you know, that's the kind of stuff that ends up winning GPPs. So, you know, you want to have more interest in an Atlanta game, but I just can't with Chicago being the opponent.
A couple of 0-2 teams, the Cincinnati Bengals and the Philadelphia Eagles. I can kind of see this one maybe being maybe a better fantasy game than an actual game, but we'll see. Joe Burrow at 6,200. Carson Wentz, who's just been, I can't explain how bad Carson Wentz has been, at 5,800. Joe Mixon is down to 5,900. Miles Sanders up to 64 from last week. Boston Scott at 44. AJ Green is at 6,000. Tyler Boyd at 59. On the flip side, you've got Deshaun at 52 and Rager at 42. Good luck trying to figure out the tight end situation in Philly. You've got Ertz at 51 and Dallas Goedert at 49. And over there on the Bengals side, you've got some guy named Drew Sample at 35. I don't know. Is there a fantasy option here? Is this one of those games where you look at it and you go, oh, that game finished 35-32?
Yeah, I'm going to have two pieces of my cash game as it exists right now from this game. I'm not touching Carson Wentz anytime soon. I don't care if Lane Johnson is back and he's better with Lane Johnson. Like, he's just not been good. There's way too many quarterbacks in great situations to worry about a couple $100 to get Carson Wentz. Joe Burrow's looked good. Just not hyper interested in playing him this week. You know, on the Philly side of the ball, Miles Sanders, I just don't think you go anywhere but there in your cash games. Like, he's probably the first guy that I put in my cash games and just said the price is too low. Cincinnati has, you know, they made Joshua Kelly look like a superstar week 1 of the season. They made both Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt look absolutely studly last week. And, you know, Miles Sanders, through one game, lived up to the hype. Price is too cheap. I mean, 6,400 on DraftKings is stupid. I'll play a lot of him. I'm not touching the wide receivers from the Eagles. Good luck with that. I don't mind taking shots on the tight ends from Philly. I'll, you know, just do my usual only one tight end in a lineup, but there's upside there. I'm not going to be doing team stacks or game stacks because I don't really think I'm going to have, like, there's 5 or 6 quarterbacks I really, really, really like this week. And so it's a week where I'm just fine being decisive and saying Carson Wentz could be okay, but I don't want okay. This is a week where I feel confident in how I've been assessing the information thus far, and I feel like it could be a good week for tournaments. On the Cincinnati side of the ball, what the fuck is wrong with Joe Mixon? What the fuck is wrong with this coaching staff that they cannot get one of the better players on their team? They just can't seem to desire to use him. AJ Green looks terrible, but he's getting a lot of targets, and you're going to have eventually a situation occur where he's not terrible. So I'm going to keep buying into AJ Green until he's not terrible. And I don't know how often I'm going to go there, but I mean, you know, I'm still going to keep some shares because he's going to him a lot. But man, the second person in my cash game lineup without question this week was Drew Sample. Like, to me, it's a no-brainer. It's a Philly defense that's been hemorrhaging not even points, but touchdowns, like real actual football points to tight ends. You still have to feel like the game script is probably going to be with Cincy trailing. Through 2 weeks, you see Burrow wanting to go to his tight end. So, and Drew Sample blocks. And that goes overlooked because he was basically just a blocking tight end before. Well, now there's a chance he just stays on the field like 96% of the time. So, At 3,500 on DraftKings, I just don't see a compelling argument to not play Drew Sample.
The scheduling gods are shining down on the San Francisco 49ers the week after they play the New York Jets. They get the New York Giants. And I think if you're going to be a team that's down Nick Bosa, Solomon Thomas, Mostert, Garoppolo, all these guys, why not do it against the Jets and the Giants? Because that's how I'd want to do it. It's just one of those things where lucky for them, it's a huge benefit for them. We'll get into it. Garoppolo at 56, questionable. Mullins is at 51, just as a side note. Daniel Jones at 55. Raheem Mostert is at 65, but he's probably not going to play. McKinnon is at 49. Coleman's out for sure at 4. Jeff Wilson Jr. was the goal line back last year at 4,000. Barkley is gone. Gallman at 49 and Lewis at 53. Devonta Freeman has not yet got a price. Also not sure if he's going to be in game shape and ready to play right away. He may get some snaps, but I don't know if that's going to be a big thing there. Slayton at 49 and Tate at 45 interest me because Sterling Shepard is going to be out. Barkley is going to be out. So if you're going to throw, and you talked about the running backs and interesting you with wide receivers, maybe Slayton and Golden Tate are the way to go there. Kendrick Bourne at 5 is really Trent Taylor at 34, Ayuk at 41. Kittle at 63, not sure about health there. Jordan Reed had a good game at 4,000. We talked a little bit about him last week, and Ross Dwelly as well. Evan Ingram at 5. What are your thoughts, first of all, on my thought that this may be a Slayton and Tate week, knowing that Dion Lewis is the guy in the backfield with Wayne Gallman?
Yeah, I mean, this game is a clusterfuck. I mean, when you look at it, what else can you really say but one of the starting quarterbacks is injured. 3 of the running backs are injured. 3 of the wide receivers are injured, and 1 of the tight ends is injured. Oh, also, over the last 2 weeks, San Francisco has lost 5 starters on the defensive side of the ball. And that's something I don't – look, I'm the guy who said Sam Darnold was an okay GPP play last week. So maybe you don't listen to anything I say. But – at some point, you have to start looking and saying, okay, you lost at least one elite level talent with Joey Bosa or whatever Bosa's playing for San Francisco. I don't know. It's hard to keep track. Solomon Thomas. I think Richard Sherman's at some point I'm sitting back and hearing a lot of people talk about all of the pieces. And I'm like, but what about Danny Dimes? He's 5,500. He's got rushing upside. Unless you think that it's a system defense, if that exists, where it's just doesn't matter who the player, it doesn't matter what the jersey on the back of the name of the back of the jersey, it's just going to be good no matter what. But there were already questions about this 49ers defense coming into the year, and now it's got players dropping off. This seems like a great buy low week to just smash Danny Dimes as a tournament. If you do what I do and you're playing a quarterback, 2 pass catchers, and 1 person from the other team, man, you can get Dimes, Tate, Slayton for under 15K. Bring it back with Jerick McKinnon or whatever limp dick they have catching a ball in San Francisco. You could do some really, and then I will say this isn't a week where it's it doesn't feel hyper important to be spending up at running back. It doesn't feel super important at receiver, but you could build some really good guaranteed unique teams with Daniel Jones, just because I don't think people really want to go there. I would go as far as to say, I'm considering playing the $150 3 entry max and just doing the 3 entries. I thought about it that could be a route that I go to just try to get a little bit different. Maybe not. Maybe it just makes it into my $15 3 entry max. So I'm not a crazy person, but I feel every time Danny Dimes had a good week last year, we were all where the fuck did that come from? And so you can't play DFS from the mentality of person is in good matchup, play him, do good. You're constantly going to see guys that are in negative matchup situations that still find a way to get it done, because these are all elite level athletes. And we forget so much that's the case. We put way too much stock into DVOA and yard at yard yak and all these terms that like make people sound super smart when they see them, and just forget how easy it is, and just really how thin the margin is between an elite player and a good player in the NFL.
When you take a look at the Giants running back situation and knowing that it's maybe Deion Lewis or even Gallman and whoever, I think that even leans more towards Daniel Jones, knowing that there's not going to be a running game. And if there is going to be a passing game, at least Deion Lewis can catch passes out of the backfield and make something happen. Any interest in, do you know a preference of Gallman or Jones, or are we just avoiding that situation? Or Gallman or Lewis, or are we just avoiding that situation completely?
Yeah, I do have a good take, and it's play neither. I mean, again, when Dion Lewis was in like the 4K range last week, it would have made sense, but he's 5,300. Or do you want to play CeeDee Lamb, or do you want to play Dion fucking Lewis? Do you want to play Deontay Johnson, or do you want to play Dion fucking Lewis? Like, ask yourself these honest questions. Oh, but Nick, one of them's a running back, but there's a flex position, and these are real decisions you have to make. And I'm going to go with the better football player 100% of the time. 100%. I've played way too long and had way too many of these bullshit, look so good on the surface. Oh, man, he's replacing this guy. And we saw all the work Barkley got, but this team did go out and sign Devonta Freeman and, has Wayne Gallman, and it's not just going to be a Dion Lewis backfield. So why am I going through this? Like, and I get it. Like, they're short on receivers. There's a lot of stuff going on here, but I just don't imagine that this is a lean on the running game type situation. One person that's not going to get mentioned, CJ Board, is going to have to see snaps. I don't think that makes him a DFS play, but look, we've had situations where, one of these guys just lucks into a 224-2 line, and now all of a sudden at minimum price that they're viable. So
real quick, Evan Ingram.
Yeah, I mean, if there's ever a week, this would be it. I would have to, push him up to like number 2 now behind Slayton on the pecking order. I think Tate is a close third. I don't think it's like a large gap or anything, but yeah.
Remaining at the 1 o'clock game times, the Houston Texans Pittsburgh Steelers matchup should be a good one for folks watching on TV. Not necessarily all that sure it's going to be at Pittsburgh, going to be a great DFS contest, but we'll find out what Nick thinks here shortly. Deshaun Watson at 65, Big Ben at 64. David Johnson comes in at 5,400. James Conner at 67. Benny Snell at 47. Will Fuller, at 6. Brandon Cooks at 52, Cobb at 44, Juju at 66, Deontay Johnson, you mentioned, at 54, just 100 more than Deion Lewis, as we talked about a minute ago. Eric Ebron at 43, Jordan Akins at 34, Darren Fells at 33. Last week we heard all about Benny Snell. Benny Snell is it doesn't matter if James Conner's back, it's Benny Snell is going to be the guy that gets at least half those carries, and he laid an egg. This is still James Conner's backfield. Do you consider James Conner at 6,700, though, a play this week?
I think he's in the mix. I got it before you could say it. No, I think he's in the mix. He's definitely not one of my favorite plays, but I think there's some viability to him. I'm trying to think who Houston played, or they tomorrow, last week. Yeah, I don't mind taking some shots on Conner. He's probably like a tournament guy for me. I don't mind Ben, but again, I think there's just too many other quarterbacks on this slate to really want to invest in him. But yeah, man, Juju at 66 feels fairly priced because I think there's going to be weeks coming where he ends up with 10 targets and 2 touchdowns. Chase Claypool looks really good, but I really think you're just playing roulette with Claypool and James Washington for who just happens to be out there to catch a long bomb. It really seems like the target tree is really narrow right now with Deontay Johnson kind of rehashing that Antonio Brown role. And I think it's silly that he's 5,400. And like I said, I think it's silly that we are looking at lesser talents that are filling in for other players that are hurt when we have an actual talented player with a ton of opportunity that's just mispriced. Like, just play better players. It's going to work out for you in the long run. Houston, well, I played Will Fuller in cash on FanDuel last week, and they haven't updated his score yet. I still see it says 0. So that was very frustrating because it wasn't a good game script, or it was a good game script from the capacity that you thought that he was going to see, primary usage. He didn't even see a target. I don't know how that happens, but I don't even know what to say. Like, the Pittsburgh defense is really good. That offensive line is still clearly garbage in Houston. Play at your own peril. Like, I don't, it could be a bounce back spot for both of them. But again, like, I think there are specifically 2 very clear upper echelon quarterbacks that I want to get more exposure to than trying to figure out if this is the week Deshaun Watson has his shit together.
That is fair enough. I can't believe that Laramie Tunsil wasn't the answer over there in Houston. Talk about disasters. The Minnesota Vikings are at home to face Tennessee at a 1 o'clock kickoff. Ryan Tannehill for Tennessee will be 59. Kirk Cousins at 55. A couple of great running backs in Derrick Henry at 78 and Dalvin Cook at 76. A.J. Brown is at 6,000 flat. Corey Davis at 52. And Adam Humphries, who made a reappearance last week for a short time at 3,900. Adam Thielen at 69. And then you've got a bunch of guys in the 3,000s with Justin Jefferson at 42 and Johnson at 36. Jonnu Smith at 52 and Kyle Rudolph at 31. I don't think there's a team in the league that's given up more points than Minnesota. So Derrick Henry smash spot. A.J. Brown, where are you going here? Or do we think Minnesota turns it around?
Yeah, I think this is a really good spot that could potentially dictate a lot of how tournaments are won this week, because these are both very clearly not good defenses. I thought Tennessee might have been coming into the year, but it's very clear that they just are not good. Or at least right now they're not executing how they should. I think that people really will gravitate towards Tannehill after it's just been his show to start off the year. And especially after, Jonnu Smith claimed the number 1 receiver role with A.J. Brown out. Corey Davis isn't. He is unfortunate because I really had a lot of high hopes for him coming out of Western Michigan, but it really just has not panned out. Man, what a spot this is for Derrick Henry to just absolutely smash. And, from a game theory perspective, that daily fantasy players are extraordinarily reactive. And a lot of common players, meaning people who, sit down on Saturday night and just click through, who played Derrick Henry last week in a smash matchup against Jacksonville and got 8 points out of the ordeal, are not going to be clicking his name this week against him. And look, this Minnesota defense, there are certain teams that have this perception that isn't real. Like, when you hear Minnesota Vikings, you remember a point at sometime recent where their defense was good. And I think people still hear it and they're like, well, Minnesota, whatever. But it's not the case. They're terrible. So for me, my favorite secondary stack this week is absolutely going to be Derrick Henry and Adam Thielen. I think that's a route I'm going to go in my main tournament team. Probably have to play another 2K defense, but really want to get that correlation in there because I think that's what is going to happen. And, I think you're going to catch some people with their pants down, especially on possibly Jonnu Smith ownership. Let me see what his price is. If it's over 5, yeah, he's 5,200. That probably changes things a little bit. But in general, I think this is a great week to kind of pivot away from what we've seen with Tennessee the last few weeks and get on the Derrick Henry train. And if it doesn't work out this week, as it might sound crazy, but up until last year, Derrick Henry had been a guy who literally only played well from November on. If he comes out here and they just don't use him as well, or he just doesn't seem like he has it, I may irrationally just go back to that mentality and say, listen, I'm not going to even chase until it's November again, and we'll see if that whole theory of him doing well later on in the year is what really happens.
And of course, this is just a preview show. We're recording this Wednesday afternoon, so the DFS headquarters is the place to go to get some more late breaking news on some of these injuries, some of these starters, and some of these value plays. Our Discord, we'll be hopping with all that information throughout the rest of the week here. But do like to give you guys that inside knowledge of where we're at least thinking of going, because that can help you build and help you realize maybe places you want to go later on in the week. The Washington football team and the Cleveland Browns, 1 o'clock game. Boy, this is thrilling stuff this week. Dwayne Haskins, 5,200. Baker Mayfield at 57. Antonio Gibson at 47. I don't know, he looked better last week. Chubb at 69 and Hunt at 61. Beckham got back into the end zone at 6,300. Terry McLaurin at 59. Steven Sims at 4,000. And then back on the flip side, you've got Landry at 55. Austin Hooper at tight end for the Cleveland Browns is at 44. And Logan Thomas at 37. You said you were going to play some Logan Thomas last week. Yeah, it was okay. I mean, nothing special, nothing good. Another game. Do you see anything here, or you just want to move on to the next?
Yeah, I think Dwayne Haskins might be 5K too high. And this is sad because he's someone that I played. I have a bunch of best ball Dwayne Haskins, so maybe later on in the year he figures it out. The team comes together, but he's just not doing anything. I'm shocked to find out, and I haven't looked, but like after game one, they had been one of the fastest teams, like most plays run in the league. And I was just like, I don't understand how that could be possible. But then I was like, oh, the other team scores and then they get the ball back and run plays. And since their plays go for like 3 yards, you're going to have more of them. Antonio Gibson, like I want to play him. I believe that you'll see his involvement increase as the year goes on. He's priced okay. Like I honestly think I'd rather take shots of Antonio Gibson than Dion Lewis or Mike Davis. Honestly, I really honestly would. On the receiving side, I mean, it's Terry McLaurin. He's another guy that I like as a possible main tournament secondary stack with Odell. Logan Thomas is fine. I'm not really looking for a shitty football team. I'm not going to try to find shittier players on the, you know what I mean? Like what is the usage of Steven Sims? I don't see it. It's already debatable if Logan Thomas is really going to be like super necessary. Again, Cleveland has been piss poor for years now defending tight ends. So there's some hope there. I think this could be I don't want to use a word like a trap spot, because I don't think, except for the most obvious situations, Nick Chubb is ever going to be like a chalky play. But Washington has thus far looked decent. And it's because we know they have a good front seven, and then everything else behind that is not. So it gives me some pause for Chubb. And again, with Hunt, like we saw a ceiling game last week. Like that's the biggest game he's put up as a Cleveland Brown thus far. I just don't have a ton of faith that it's going to continue. So I really like, Mayfield to Odell. I like Mayfield to Jarvis less. But it just, and the thing that really concerns me is this a game where Cleveland could actually assert dominance? Because if that does end up being the case, because I don't think Washington has a very good line, and I think Cleveland's defensive line and their pass rush is fairly intimidating. Could this be a case where it gets out to a 17-0 score and they are just using Chubb way more often? So I really have to think this one through, because this might be one of those, on the surface with the numbers, looks like it's a good idea to fade Chubb. But if everybody's thinking that, maybe it's a good idea to like play him and the Cleveland defense and just hope that, they score a couple of touchdowns, hopefully one defensively. That would really help that scenario, and just try to run the clock down. I don't know. I mean, it's definitely a scenario where I could see a couple of guys from this game potentially putting up big enough scores to really matter this week. Just got to figure out if it's going to be like the Cleveland passing game, or if they're able to actually, establish the run, and just try to wind the game clock down that way.
In what could be a good football game out there in Western New York, the Los Angeles Rams return to the East Coast to take on the Buffalo Bills on 1 o'clock start. Boy, I mean, there's some options here, but you also have to think of, and this is why we break it down game by game, because I think this is one of those games where that comes into a huge aspect of what we're going to be talking about here. Jared Goff is at 56, Josh Allen all the way to 69, but you know what he can do with the legs, and he's been pretty accurate with the long ball this year as well, throwing to Stephon Diggs. The Rams' backfield is a mess with Akers, the rib injury, at 4,200. Darrell Henderson at 54. Looked good last week, but that was for the first time. Malcolm Brown had finger surgery on Monday, is expected to play, but we'll see at 5,200. Devin Singletary at 49 and Moss at 45. You still got Cooper Kupp as the most expensive Ram at 63. At some point, that will be Robert Woods, but he's only 61 right now. Van Jefferson at 31. He's not had a bad start to his rookie campaign. Josh Reynolds at 37. We mentioned Diggs is all up to 7,000, but could he see Jalen Ramsey this week is the question, because Ramsey last week, no, you did not. The Eagles did not complete a pass last week, not a single pass last week, when Jalen Ramsey was the closest defender. John Brown at 57, Cole Beasley at 45. You got the Rams with 3-touchdown man Tyler Higbee at 59 and Dawson Knox at 34. Does Jalen Ramsey give you concern with Stephon Diggs?
Yeah, a little bit. I still favor – I'm always going to go talent over, like, matchup, right? And Stephon Diggs is a very, very talented receiver. This was actually something that surprised me, because over the last few weeks, I've really started to build out I've taken a lot of what I did in NASCAR and trying to apply it to football to build out a projection system, which, with the understanding being, I'm not really trying to use it for the actual numbers, but just trying to use it to identify situations that I otherwise wouldn't have just looked at and been like, oh, yeah, that's interesting. Jared Goff popped like as one of the top quarterbacks this week in that model. Now, granted, it's using all 2020 data. So it's got literally 2 weeks worth of data. I think it's interesting, though, because it's not like Goff has been good. Like he hasn't been bad, but it's not like he's been a stud or anything where he's put up like 35-point games, but it has him putting up like 27.5 fantasy. It was just something that caught my eye. It probably means nothing because it's not enough information to really work off of, but it at least made me say, I might play a little bit of him, because I just don't think in general he's going to carry much ownership. The price is low, but Trubisky's right around there. And again, people are going to play the guy playing the Falcons defense before they're going to play the guy playing the Buffalo defense. So there's some intrigue there. As a whole, all of these running games seem pretty much like stay away zones. I think you're constantly going to be jumping between which running back on both of these teams is the one that actually does something. But it's kind of crazy. Like, so who does stuff for these teams, right? Like Cooper Kupp, it's not like it was 2 years ago before they really started running the 12 like they did, where it was just Kupp force-fed, red zone target constantly. You've seen those 8 and 10 target games over the last like 10 games with this Rams team. come down to 5 and 6 target games. And you're right, where he's priced at, it really doesn't make sense to me to play Kupp over Robert Woods. And so I really think the top 2 receiving options on this team honestly might be Robert Woods and Tyler Higbee. And there'll be situations where Kupp goes out there, and I still think he's a threat in the red zone. But at 6,300, you need enough out of him that I don't think 6 targets is going to really cover it. So, and the beauty of a team like Buffalo truly is that I think for the most part, you've got a lot of consolidated production. It's going to be Josh Allen because he's the goal line back. It's going to be Stefon Diggs, and it's going to be John Brown. But interestingly, Gabriel Davis has started to get some notice in the red zone. For anyone who played, college football DFS, and we're it's 2 games, it's only 3 targets. There's just something to monitor. A lot of DFS isn't necessarily just like, who am I playing this week? But it's really looking at it and assessing like what could happen. What happens if John Brown pulls up limp and someone else, Stefon Diggs, already has a huge share. He can't take double the work on. Gabriel Davis was a stud in college football DFS for like 2 years at the University of Central Florida. I think the talent's there for sure. Not what we're looking at this week, but just kind of stuffing it in the back of our mind to use in the future. Yeah, I mean, Josh Allen is one of the quarterbacks I'll be using this week. I think Josh Allen is going to be a quarterback I'm using every week just because he possesses on a week-to-week basis tournament-winning upside.
I also can see a situation where the Rams front kind of over pursues. That's been the one knock on Aaron Donald, is that he does sometimes lose the run game as he over pursues the quarterback, which, makes Josh Allen, in my eyes, a fantastic play this week for the Buffalo Bills. With that situation there with Tyler Higbee, you mentioned him possibly being the number 2 wide receiver kind of play for the Rams. Is there anything that you see on the flip side with Dawson Knox? I mean, he's gotten a target in the red zone, but I mean, 3,400 is cheap. Can't go there though, right?
No, I mean, I think that apparently the hopes of him being a thing evaporated with the Stefon Diggs acquisition and then the drafting for Zach Moss. So now you've got a lot of guys who are probably higher talented than Dawson Knox. Remember, Dawson Knox played for Ole Miss, if I'm remembering this correctly, and he basically didn't do anything offensively the entire time he was there. Granted, he was playing with, DK Metcalf and other good – I can't remember who came out with DK – A.J. Brown. So he's playing with, like, high-caliber players, but, like, they didn't really utilize him. He was drafted specifically just off of, like, intangibles. And that's why I don't always agree. I'm not a scout, but like at some point you needed to have done something to be a viable NFL player. It can't just be he's tall, he can jump. Okay, let's play him.
All right. Let's see. We were 53 minutes in, so we're beating
5 afternoon games. Can you believe it? 5 afternoon games.
The one game we're going to talk about first, though, and if you could, like I mentioned. If you at least like what you're hearing and you like to talk football, just do us a favor, like, subscribe, hit that review, leave us a message. Maybe we'll start doing some contests on this show and getting some people into our Discord, showing them what it's all about. If they're nice enough to do something like that, let us know. Leave a message if you want to leave a little message on below here. Go right ahead, and maybe we'll send you an invite into the Discord. It's great stuff. We do all the sports here at the DFS headquarters. It's not just the NFL. But let's get back to it. The Carolina Panthers and the LA Chargers, and I don't know, where do you want to start? Do you want to start with a punctured lung? Do you want to start with the greatest player in football history, apparently, getting injured? Do you want to start with this guy named Joshua Kelly? We could go anywhere, but let's do it. Let's break it down real quick. Teddy Bridgewater for the Carolina Panthers is going to be 5,200. Justin Herbert is going to be 5,900. Taylor with the punctured lung at 57, so I doubt he's going to play. We'll see. McCaffrey obviously injured, but his price is down to 9,200, so $800 savings there, I guess. Mike Davis at 51, Trenton Cannon at 4,000. I don't see the name Reggie Bonifant there, but I imagine by the end of the week he will be a running back for the Carolina Panthers. Josh Kelly's been fantastic, getting a ton of. I mean, he's getting the opportunities that a lot of guys would like to see at 5,000 flat. Eckler at 68. DJ Moore, the wide receiver for the Carolina Panthers, is at 61. Robbie Anderson at 52. Also interested in Curtis Samuel at 4,000 because maybe he becomes the running back. Obviously, in college, he did quite a bit of that and embarrassed my Wolverines a few times. Keenan Allen at 61. Mike Williams at 43. Guyton at 34. Hunter Henry at 48. Ian Thomas is at 3,000. Let's start there. Where do you see Carolina going in the backfield? Is it Cannon? Is it Davis? Is Davis going to be the third down guy? Will Bonifant play a role? What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think after last week, everyone is entirely sure that Mike Davis is just the second string version of Christian McCaffrey, because I don't know if you knew this, he caught 8 passes in the fourth quarter. And so if you're building a projection system, it's really easy to figure out Mike Davis's projection this week. It's 32 catches for 280 yards, because that's what he did in the fourth quarter. And as we all know, that's how it's always going to work. I will say it is interesting as we see a report. Jalen Reagor broke his thumb and he is out for 6 to 8 weeks. Anyway, so that bolsters Miles Sanders like super huge because it's one less capable pass catcher. Anyway.
Does it? But real quick, Greg Ward. I mean, just going back because obviously we're talking.
No, they're all garbage. Everybody that they're receivers, they're all trash. I mean, maybe like eventually Deshaun Jackson might have a game. This strikes me as being something that could happen, but I'm just not wild about going that route. I really haven't seen it out of the team to want to start taking risks. I'm going to just play what I know. All right, back to Carolina. Yeah, I mean, I get it. Like, there is definitely a decent shot that Mike Davis is not trash this week in fantasy, right?
Sure.
But he's playing a Chargers team that stymied Joe Mixon. I'm 95% sure they stymied Clyde Edwards-Helaire last week. And if any of you listening to this are sitting there thinking to yourself that Mike Davis is anywhere near the caliber of player of either of those guys, you're fucking wrong. Furthermore, here's my biggest concern. Was anyone else active? I know Reggie Bonifant was on the practice squad. Were they only carrying 2 active running backs?
Cannon was, correct?
I don't know because he didn't see I looked at the inactives. Cannon wasn't listed as an inactive. But you don't list practice squad guys as an inactive. I don't know whether he's on the practice squad or not. So my biggest concern, first and foremost, without knowing any more information, was Mike Davis the only other guy that they had up? Because Dion Lewis was the only other guy they had up. Wayne Gallman was inactive.
Right.
So
Cannon is on the 53.
Okay, so Cannon's on the 53. So that does help. I think that does help Mike Davis. Okay, second part is they didn't have any, there was no alternative game plan, right?
No.
He got hurt in a game. This is what we have to do. Can we confidently say, and remember, it doesn't fucking matter what coaches say because Jordan Reed wasn't supposed to see any more than like 10 snaps and he saw 27, right? And Kyle Shanahan blatantly came out and said, I don't see us giving Jordan Reed any more snaps than what he saw. And that pulled a lot of people off of him, as it should have, because if you don't think a guy is going to play, why the fuck would you play him? Anyway, did they game plan differently? Are we going to see more Curtis Samuel out of the backfield? Are we going to see Trenton Cannon involved? Are we going to see Reggie Bonifant involved? The coach says that, he says that Mike Davis is going to be the guy, but I have extreme skepticism that this guy is just going to hop into a Christian McCaffrey role. I don't think I'm going there in cash games. I don't think you really need to. Like I said, I'm going to pay up a little bit more to guys like CeeDee Lamb and Deontay Johnson, who I just see being in a far better situation. We've all heard all offseason about how good this Chargers defense is going to play. We are completely willing to forget about all of that now because fucking Mike Davis has come into our lives, and we should just bow down before the king. What about DJ Moore? 61. I would rather play DJ Moore at 6,100 than fucking Mike Davis at 5,100. How about let's look at the other side of the game? I would rather play Joshua Kelly at 5K. Why wouldn't we talk about him in a far superior matchup against the worst run defense in all of the NFL? But we would rather talk about Jonathan or Mike Davis because, hey, Christian McCaffrey's hurt, so he's definitely the guy. We already saw I keep getting Jonathan Taylor and Joshua Kelly. Like, I can't get their names correct. But, like, we already saw they're willing to give the rookie 25 carries. What do you think this kid could do with 25 carries against Carolina? I will tell you what he could do. He could take down tournaments. I don't see Mike Davis taking down tournaments. I understand for your season-long league, if you had CMC or if you have a bad running back situation, like, yes, pick up Mike Davis. Fine, whatever. It's cool. But, I mean, in DFS, it just seems super thin. If that's where you want to go, fine. I just don't think that the logic is there like everybody thinks it is. I'd rather take Robbie Anderson. I'd rather go with the pass catchers. We already know they're going to be trailing. What if this is the game they decide to get the terrible Ian Thomas involved? Kid's got so much talent, just not really using him. What if this is a situation where they're like, hey, Ian Thomas is greater than Mike Davis. Let's just give it to Ian. There's so many things that they can game plan that makes me really nervous about the potential and why I would just rather, and then we'll talk about it. The same thing goes with San Francisco too. We don't have to take guys that we really don't have faith in, that we don't believe or we don't know as a 100% surety this is going to be how it plays out. It's great that this guy had 8 catches. That's fantastic. But they can do a lot of things differently in game planning. And like I said, after seeing what the Chargers have done to running backs this year, it's just an easy decision for me to not really look this route. And I may just have a complete fade across the board and not play him in anything at all.
About 2 minutes ago, Chargers coach Anthony Lynn announced that Justin Ederbatter will start under center for the Chargers this week. Tyrod Taylor apparently needs to visit some new pain management doctors. That's unfortunate.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see much appeal here. I think that this is an in-hand game for the most part for the Chargers. I think you could see 50 touches between Eckler and Josh Kelly. So I just don't think he's going to have to push too much. I think he's capable to. It really impressed me. I'll be completely honest because I had not been super high on him coming into this season, but he looked good enough. I can't say anything bad about him. Hunter Henry's another guy I think that's worth a look. He seems to be getting some decent amount of targets. Wouldn't hate playing Keenan Allen. I'm just not sure that this is really the game script for it.
Really looking forward to watching Red Zone this week and not having them just show America's Game of the Week, which is already on the other channel 99% of the time with 5 games, as you mentioned. So that's pretty solid. Unfortunately, one of those games I don't hope they show much of is the Jets and the Colts. God, couldn't care less.
Hey, can I stop you real quick?
Stop me. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, Jonathan Taylor. Let's move to the next game. There's literally no players that you could possibly pay me to consider on the Jets. It's just not worth it. Again, you could find cheap guys everywhere. Don't play bad players on bad teams.
Yeah, I'm caught myself there. Let's do this then. Let's just list the Colts prices then. Rivers at 6, Taylor at 7. Taylor's all the way up to 7,000, probably deservedly so. Nyheim Hines at 48, another guy that we thought may be in the mix last week that just was not. T.Y. Hilton at 56, Zach Pascal at 45. And here's my play. Here's the guy I want you to get in on at least on Wednesday, Michael Pittman.
Mo Alley Cox. Oh, Michael Pittman. Okay,
Michael
I thought we were
Pittman
going to get
4,000. Mo Alley Cox obviously at 38 showed up well in Doyle's absence. But yeah, Pittman could be the guy for me this week, and I'm an idiot, so what do I know?
Yeah, I don't have a strong take anyway on the receiving game here. I mean, like we talked about T.Y. Hilton, and this was an absolute explosion spot for him last week, and it just dropped a touchdown. I don't know. There's points where guys just fall off. Maybe that's where he's at. I might have like 5% in tournaments just because I still believe he could have some kind of explosion, but I don't really have anything to like. I feel like everything in this game is just extraordinarily thin. I don't feel like there's really anything where I'm like, oh yeah, this guy, like, it's Jonathan Taylor who should, and he could have even had a bigger game last week, but Phillip Rivers felt the need, on the 2-yard line on first down to pass it to Zach Pascal, or else Jonathan Taylor would have had like an unquestioned slate winning week. And on FanDuel, he's just free. He is like, you continue to scroll down through the running backs before you get to Jonathan Taylor. I think he's like 6,700 or something like that.
I don't see this being a Nyheim Hines week at 4,800, even when they kind of thought of him making a lot of catches, because I just can't see the Jets hanging in.
Hey, this is a good learning moment. Perfect fucking learning moment. So why didn't Nyheim Hines get a lot of looks last week? What was different? What happened? Well, they had a week in between games to game plan, right? He got a lot of looks because Taylor wasn't as acclimated in that offense as Hines was. And when Marlon Mack, surprise, surprise, went down with the injury, that forced them they forced their hand, and they weren't completely confident at that point with the practice reps that they had given. They came into the season saying it was going to be Mack and Taylor. It wasn't Jonathan Taylor. It's your backfield. So this is why I'm saying, like, guys like Lewis, guys like Gallman, guys like Mike Davis, it's not a slam dunk. With a week to prepare, the game plan could change completely and entirely.
Oh, my favorite fantasy team is up next. I just absolutely love what Kyler Murray's doing in Arizona as the Cardinals get set to take on the Lions and what may be, I think, the chalk stack game of the week. You've got Matt Stafford at 63 and Kyler Murray at 68. I just love playing Kyler Murray. The backfield for the Lions just gets more complicated. Kerryon Johnson scored a touchdown last week. I mean, you've got him at 42, Swift at 5, Peterson at 45. You've got Kenyon Drake at 6,000, who came on Twitter and said things are going to change for him. And fantasy-wise, he was talking about fantasy and how he's going to be much better a fantasy player in the coming weeks. DeAndre Hopkins, every single person in the world told you his numbers were going to go down. He's been fantastic. He's at 79. Fitzgerald at 46. Kirk's disappeared at 45. Galladay, getting closer. Maybe this is the week at 62. If not, it's Marvin Jones at 58 and Amendola 46 and Cephas at 4,000. Dan Arnold is the tight end over there in Arizona at 28. That's pointless. And Hawkinson at 53. Do you love Kyler Murray as much as I do? And I'm a Rams fan, and it pains me to say that.
Yeah, I mean, he's a running quarterback who continues to be underpriced. He's not as underpriced as he was last week. This is a very clearly good matchup. I don't dislike him. I think the problem is, like, you can't really stack him with two of his receivers because it's apparent that really the only receiver that exists is DeAndre Hopkins. I think you'll see Kirk as the year goes on and age ultimately starts to creep up faster on Fitzgerald than it does everyone else. Like, he could be a guy later on in the season. But I think, yeah, like, I guess one of my bigger concerns is, like, do we see a clear path for someone on Detroit? Because they've looked terrible, in my opinion. Like, even with the touchdown, I don't think Marvin Jones really had all that great of a game. Like, Marvin Hall caught a touchdown pass. Cephas was basically invisible. Hawkinson didn't do too much. I just get really concerned. And maybe they just want to run the ball, it seems. Like, that's the Detroit mentality. Like, I just have some concern because I don't want to play a guy unless I could bring it back. Because last week, I mean, ultimately, the stack of Kyler Murray to DeAndre Hopkins, like that wasn't a winner, right? Like a portion of that was, but 20 points from DeAndre Hopkins at his price, that's nothing that you're like wildly excited about. Like I'm thinking when I'm playing him, we're getting 28 to 30 because we're getting 8 catches, we're going over 100 yards, and we're getting at least 1 touchdown. And we got to 80 yards, we got 6 catches, and we got a touchdown. So it just didn't, I'm just worried that it could turn into and like you're saying with Drake has been a favorite of projection models the first 2 weeks of the season, and it hasn't panned out. I could see this being a week where they really do work to try to get Drake more involved in the offense. And so I don't know that I will necessarily like fade Kyler Murray, but I'm definitely thinking that like I'm going to have a little bit less than I am of some of the other guys I like more. This kind of feels like an uncomfortable game to me, whereas almost every other game I feel like confident about the decision I'm making about where it's going. I keep coming back and just not finding that piece or how Detroit is really going to keep things interesting.
If we're going to go back and use stats, if we don't want to just use this year, go back to last year, is Hawkinson that guy you can flip back with?
What was that? I wasn't paying attention to anything you said.
The reverse flip. When you talk about stack, if you wanted to stack,
I don't want
TJ.
I'm not. I guess. I don't know. It's just something that's not really that interesting to me, and maybe I'm just being hard-headed, but I've kind of cashed out mentally on the idea of, trying to do a stack here, and it might be a situation where I might just run Kyler naked, which always sounds really gross when you say it. Like as an adult human being, it just sounds really awkward. But it might be a situation where I just don't play him with any of his receivers. Hope that he has 3 rushing touchdowns. Hope he does something like he did, like Dak did last week. I don't know. I'm just not really there. Hey, I gotta tell you, we gotta skip to the last game because the next game on the list is too important to come anything but last. It's the coup de grace. We gotta wait to talk about it.
Yeah,
so.
I was gonna say if you're not gonna stack that game, then you're gonna want to stack this game. But I'm not gonna say that about Tampa Bay and Denver. So let's go to Tampa Bay and Denver. You've got Tom Brady, who I think we knew he wasn't going to be Super Bowl MVP. Tom Brady on his way to Tampa Bay. At 6,100, Jeff Driscoll at 5,300, I believe Locke probably not playing there. We saw Fournette have a decent game last week for the Bucs. He's at 62. Ronald Jones at 5. Melvin Gordon at 58. Lindsey at 4,900 there. Evans at 68. Godwin, concussions concerns as well, 6,700. Scotty Miller at 4. With the injury to Cortland Sutton, that brings you to Jerry Jeudy at 5,000, maybe even KJ Hamler at 3,000. Tim Patrick, 32 for Hamilton. Noah Fant at 5,400. The tight end there is probably going to be the most, the most appreciative of the extra targets coming his way. Gronkowski at 33, no, and Howard at 35. What does the Cortland Sutton injury do for you? Or is it because it's Jeff Driscoll? Or do we not care?
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't have been a situation I was that interested in targeting before. Probably isn't a situation I'm very interested in targeting now. I think there's some viability here on the Denver side. I think, Noah Fant should be a target monster. Especially with Jerry Jeudy hurt. I mean, he's been limited in practice, but limited doesn't mean you're not playing. And especially with, your top dog out, you might see limited mean probable this week. I think that, and I might, I'm a guy telling you not to play Mike Davis. I don't think he's a great play. And then I'm turning around and saying, but maybe play KJ Hamler because he's 3K at a position that has the highest level of variance in receiver. If you're playing him, you are literally thinking that he's going to go like 5 for 50, and that's it. And all you're playing him for is because you want a high-priced quarterback, or you want a high-priced defense, or you want a high-priced tight end, and he's your only route to get there. I don't see them scoring a ton of points, but man, I mean, there's a world we live in where he could see 10 or 12 targets and just get stupid little 5-8 yard dump off passes and do everything you need to have done for your cash game team.
And as a college football player, you obviously know that once Hamler gets the ball, there's an opportunity for him to take the offense on any play.
I mean, Hamler was a monster, an absolute monster. And that's the craziest part is this is a kid that has legitimate talent that is effectively the third receiver on this team, really the fourth receiver if you throw Fant in there. So, yeah, I mean, it is really undercover how much receiving talent Denver has. Like, it's insanity. We make such a big deal about Kansas City, make such a big deal about Dallas, but you're talking about Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler, Noah Fant. Like, Lord have mercy.
One big difference.
Well, yeah, the quarterback. and I liked Drew Lock at Missouri. I thought Drew Lock, until his senior year, was a stud. And he did lose Emmanuel Hall, and that was his guy. That was like his guy, and I think that fucked his season up a lot that year. But yeah, I think there's some viability. And then on the flip side of the ball, I don't want any of these guys. I'm not interested. I'm not buying, the Fournette resurgence. He had 12 carries. You need to see more than that to feel like he's a guy that's playable. I think the salary is like, he's $6,200. Are you fucking kidding? Like, Miles Sanders is $200 more with an unquestioned, never in doubt, bigger role on the team. So, like, yeah, I mean, I get it. Maybe in tournaments, you just think that Fournette's finally going to be unleashed because Brady is going to make it so that there's not a bunch of stacked boxes. But I feel like this week that's really thin, and you're probably just chasing.
At Nick from CWE, you ready for the main event?
Yeah, I really wanted to just talk the entire hour and a half about this game.
The Dallas Cowboys, the Seattle Seahawks in Seattle, a 4:25 start, America's game of the week. Dak Prescott is at 7,200, Russell Wilson at 73, Zeke at 83. Will be the top dog on the slate running back wise. Tony Pollard at 43, Chris Carson at 6,600. You've got Cooper at 65, Gallup at 55, CeeDee Lamb at 54, Tyler Lockett 64, Metcalf 65, David Moore at 36. You've got Greg Olsen at 42, Dalton Schultz. What a game for Dalton Schultz last week at 45. Everyone?
Yeah, where to even start? I was dead wrong on Dalton Schultz last week. I mean, I think on the podcast, I just didn't believe him to have a lot of time. I don't even know that I believe he does now, but I believe he has a ton of opportunity. I really think that's what it comes down to. Whew. First of all, DK Metcalf is free on FanDuel. You have to scroll a lot until you get there. And that's the craziest part because FanDuel is a site where you're touchdown hunting, because it's a half-point PPR, and a guy that literally his game is scoring touchdowns is like 6,500. I don't get that one.
Him and Taylor make a great start.
Yeah, I think exactly. Like in your cash games, in my opinion, I think those are just the two guys you start with immediately, and they carry a huge amount of equity for what you're. I actually found myself playing Russell Wilson in cash on FanDuel with football players that are good and having money left over and spending up on defense and having money left over in flex where I'm like, I guess I'll put Dalvin Cook in there. I don't really want to, so I need to figure something out. But man, this game, Dallas's defense is trash. There's no question about it. They're letting Russ cook. Mr. Unlimited is just out there doing things. that we always knew he could do, but he had like 4 chances over his like 9-year career or whatever we're at now to actually do them. Dak is there. You almost assume already that Dallas is already down a touchdown in this game before it even started. They've somehow put themselves at a deficit. So Dak is going to be. I'm going to make a bold prediction. I think Dak is going to end up outpricing Lamar Jackson at some point, like soon, because even though Lamar has the theoretical higher leg upside, this is a great offense with a shitty defense that's going to constantly be playing from behind. Like, there's no better recipe in fantasy football than what I'm saying. So it's just figuring out how to put this together. So one great thing is that I don't really think we're considering any of the Seattle tight ends. I don't care that Greg Olsen or whoever's the tight end. Yeah, Greg Olsen got a touchdown. Whatever. I'm not playing Greg Olsen. I don't think the ceiling's there. Dalton Schultz, I actually don't mind this week, which means he's going to be terrible. I think that's my pattern with how it's going to go with Dalton Schultz. I think that Seattle in the middle of the field is going to be a situation where you're going to be able to get some leverage on them. This could be a good week to try to go to Michael Gallup. He's been poor thus far just because he hasn't really seen targets, but I think that their game plan will be emphasized, try to take down Zeke and try to keep Amari Cooper off of the score sheet. And it's going to open it up for everyone else. And in years past where taking down Zeke like cripples the entire offense, it doesn't do that in 2020 because you have CeeDee Lamb, who I'm telling you right now he's already the best receiver on this Cowboys team already. And it's game 3 of the NFL season. 5,400 is an absolutely stupid price for him. Just stupid. I will give FanDuel some credit sometimes. They've seemed to like move in pricing some guys up. Obviously not Taylor, obviously not DK Metcalf. And maybe it's mostly in college football that I've really seen that where DraftKings, like, there's always a little bit of looseness in FanDuel. You look like the pricing, you're like, I'm going to have to fucking play someone I've never even heard of to make a lineup work. My initial lean here is that I'm going to go Russ Wilson, DK Metcalf, bring it back with CeeDee in cash games. I think you throw either Carson or, Tyler Lockett in there in tournaments. I think if you're playing Dak, like I said, I'm probably going to go really low on Amari Cooper and just do, 2 out of 3 players where it's Schultz, CeeDee Lamb, maybe 2 out of 4, Schultz, CeeDee Lamb, Gallup, and Zeke Elliott. But, man, this is like a hyper-attractive game environment to be in. This is you've seen 3 games now. I'm sorry, you've seen 4 games now with these 2 teams combined where there have just been ridiculous amounts of scoring. I just don't, when I look at it, I just don't see why that stops this week.
Because that's what football does. This game's going to finish 17-7.
Please don't. I mean, it'll be so tilting because the worst part of DFS is always the afternoon slate because typically you're looking like a 9-4 or 10-3 split in terms of how the games are set up, right? So you always have great lineups in the morning and something happens in the afternoon that always slaughters it. And it would just be serendipitous for you to start off super hot and be like, holy shit, look at my lineup. I've got like 4 players from this Dallas-Seattle game, and that there's 7 field goals scored the whole game. Don't put that juju on me.
At Nick from CWE, Nicholas, real quick, we talked on FanDuel. It seems like you like Jonathan Taylor and DK Metcalf to lead off your cash games. We talk about tournaments a lot. What about cash games here for DK? Where are you looking to start? Not guaranteeing we're going to start because we've got a lot of time, but There's a preview show. Where are your initial thoughts here for cash games on DK?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's super simple. Like the first two in my lineup were Sanders and Sample. I'm probably going to put Jonathan Taylor in there, and my lineup. I'm going to play Deontay Johnson and CeeDee Lamb for the second straight week because I think that they're still underpriced for their floor. It's not even their upside. It's, we've seen Deontay Johnson with double-digit targets in back-to-back weeks. CeeDee Lamb definitely sees a great matchup. We didn't talk about it, but fuck, Julian Edelman and Russell Gage the week before have just torn the shit out of this Seattle interior. So it's hard not to like that. If we see something similar that we saw last week and he actually scores, you could be looking at damn near a 30-point game from CeeDee Lamb. So, yeah, I mean, those are the easiest guys for me to put in my lineup and just build around.
Nick, appreciate your time. It is the Eat the Chalk podcast brought to you by the DFS headquarters. He is at Nick from CWE. He is asking you, not me, he is asking you to like, subscribe. No, it's me.
Yeah, just don't talk to me on Twitter.
You won't talk back anyway, so it doesn't matter.
That's true.
I am at HQ Golf Guy. Please, we appreciate all the support out there. And if you leave a nice comment, leave a little review, we may consider throwing you into our Discord chat here to let you check out all the stuff that's happening, because it is a great time of the year for sports to be played anyway. So appreciate your time, appreciate your efforts. We appreciate you, Nick. Thanks a lot for all your information as well. That is it. Our Week 3 preview show is in the books. Again, Eat the Chalk podcast brought to you by the at DFS headquarters on Twitter, the DFS headquarters. That's it. We'll see you next time.